This is Keith Haney, host of Film Session with Haney and DeWitz. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
I'm the Greg.
And I am Dave Show.
We host the Greg and Dave Show on Public House Media.
Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out our show, The Greg and Dave Show, where we talk about strange, bizarre, and sometimes just downright quirky news stories that you may not have heard about.
A new show comes out every Wednesday. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes. And hey, thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey everyone, welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy and you probably are too. This is Emily and I'm here this week with comic enthusiast Jack Albert, and we're here to talk nerdy to you. It's really great to have you on today, Jack. And so I want to see what your take is on the Marvel versus DC comics, kind of the whole spectrum of it, not just the comic books themselves, but also like anything that's been put out by them. Because personally, I kind of feel like I like them pretty equally, but we can go categorically, and we'll compare the two, I guess, properties together to each other. So we're going to do these different categories: heroes, villains, storyline/themes, team-ups, and adaptations. All right, so this is not going to be like a final word on, the end-all, be-all, this is how it has to be, but we're just going to voice our opinions and see how things pan out.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Oh, definitely.
I'm more of a film nerd than anything, but I have gotten into the comic adaptations of everything within the past, probably, 15 years or so ever since. And we've talked a little bit about this beforehand when you asked me to come on the show, but yeah. The Spider-Man films were, I think, what really grabbed my attention way back when they first came out. And I think ever since then, I've just been, digging deeper into the mythology. And I remember when I was really young, I was digging into a lot of the encyclopedias on heroes and then starting to dig into more of the original storylines as well. So, yeah, this is a fun topic to cover. And we're certainly not going to get to all of it, but it's going to be fun.
There's so much. Yeah, exactly. It will be a lot of fun. And I think the way we're going to go through it, I think, is going to be fun too, because we can kind of, because they have similar things in both of them. They obviously both have heroes and they have villains and so on. So we're taking things that they have that are alike and seeing how they stack up against each other. So, all right. So should we say which ones we think we like better now? And then at the end, see if we still agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, at least to start, just to see, where our preconceptions are to begin with, and then if they change at all.
Exactly. Okay. So just right off the bat up front, I think personally I am more of a Marvel person, only because I know more about Marvel right now. Like you said, the first Spider-Man movies was what kind of got me into the comic series genre. And so because of that, Spider-Man is Marvel, and that just kind of, drew me in, and I learned more about the Marvel section of the superhero stories than the DC side of things. So that's just me.
Yeah, and it's funny because it really is a tough choice, and it's weird because it's hard for me to pick between the two, but I think overall there's many different reasons why I like the DC line of stories just a little bit more than the Marvel line. Okay. It's a little weird, especially because when I think about it, like, who doesn't have a top 5 selection of favorite heroes or favorite comics, and of the 4 out of the 5 that I have so far, 4 of them are Marvel. And yet I feel like overall as a trend, I kind of prefer the DC trend of storytelling, like the DC tone. It's weird. I don't know why. Yeah. It's just sort of a feeling I have, but
Maybe we'll find out why as we go through our categories here then.
Yeah.
All right. So we disagree so far.
Great start.
So exactly. So we'll see how this pans out. Maybe one of us will change our minds, or both of us. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start off with the obvious, the heroes, because those are the ones that everybody knows of, right? We've got our Marvel heroes that are like Superman, or not Superman, sorry, Spider-Man. That's what I meant to say. I promise. I really
don't mix those up.
No. Spider-Man and Iron Man and Thor and, the Avengers. We got also X-Men in the Marvel category as well. But then on the DC side, we've got things like Superman, I said that correctly, and Batman and Wonder Woman and all those guys on that side of things. So what are your initial thoughts on heroes? Which one do you think has a better quality hero?
Yeah, and this is something that in my limited understanding of it, I think I got to side with Marvel on having the better heroes overall. I don't know how much like digging you've done into the fandoms of both of Marvel and the DC universes, but there's this common critique, and I don't know where it started or where it came from originally, but the idea, and maybe some of the listeners have heard it as well, that Marvel has more interesting heroes, but DC has more interesting villains, which is kind of a weird dynamic to have. But have you heard that before? And
I have, yeah.
Okay.
I've actually heard that from several people, yeah. And actually, I would tend to agree on that as well. I actually just saw an interesting video from Sparky McFly on YouTube, and it was going over kind of what we're doing right now. But he explained why the mindset behind Marvel's heroes and the mindset behind DC's heroes, not having spoken with the creators at all, but just kind of what his interpretation of the heroes were from each side. And it, I think, definitely has an impact on the likability of the heroes. Marvel tends to go with heroes that were either created by accident or on purpose, but they were created in some way. They weren't naturally born heroes necessarily, for the most part. Some of the X-Men were born with mutant powers and the mutant gene and that sort of thing. But for the most part, the heroes were created. Think of the Avengers. Hulk happened by accident. Spider-Man happened by accident. Iron Man happened kind of by accidental necessity, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
no, I completely agree. And when you use the term forge, right? Like the Marvel heroes are forged, and the first thing that pops to my mind is Tony Stark sitting in a cave, building his suit for the first time. And I think that's part of why we're so drawn to those type of heroes, because it's like, oh, in our own fictional mindscape that we have, maybe we could do something like that if the chips were down and we were put to it. Like maybe we're just like Tony Stark or just like Peter Parker, where we're the smartest guy in the room, or we're the nerd, but no one really respects us, that kind of thing. So I think there's that relatability aspect to all of it that's important.
It totally is. Yeah, totally. And then it definitely makes them more relatable. And it also, you notice that the heroes have their powers, but they also have some kind of consequence because of having their powers.
Right.
And usually that consequence kind of plays into their drive to be a hero too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think of Spider-Man, where he got bit by the spider, so he has these spider powers, but then he was using his powers for good and missed somebody, and now feels guilty because his uncle died because of somebody he let go.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's like, all right, now I'm driven by the guilt of his uncle dying to go and, to help other people so that the same thing won't happen to them. And so there's that consequence of being guilty, having something on your conscience, or in the case of maybe Captain America, feeling like that honor bound duty to do something. And now he actually is able to. Mm-hmm. He has that duty, but he has, there's also the consequence of him being frozen for however many years, 70 years or whatever. So he's like, oh, well, now I'm a man out of my time, but he can still help.
Yeah. You've touched on the idea of the psychology of these heroes, which I think is really important, in that they're not just these paper figures that, they can do anything they want, so everything must be perfect for them, right? And I think
exactly.
If I may throw in a little bit of support for the DC side of things here, because when you say DC, the first person that comes to mind is Superman in most people's mind. And he's, I think in most cases, written off as, well, he's got everything figured out and he's basically impossible to beat and he has no weaknesses, that sort of thing. So I think that's part of where, the lack of relatability in some cases. But the thing that's always interested me about Superman is simply that fact of being virtually perfect, but yet no one around you is. And how do you deal with that? And I think some of the best storylines in both the original comics and the adaptations have tapped into the idea that, yeah, Clark Kent is virtually perfect. Like nothing can happen to him, but those around him are affected by his actions.
Right. And then so he's dealing with, everything is great for him, but how does he reconcile that with what's going on around him and how can he fix that?
Mm-hmm. And just because, like he could save anyone from anything, or, he could basically survive anything or come back from anything. I always think of one of my favorite quotes from the Man of Steel movie that came out recently, which there are differing opinions on that movie overall, but to me, one of the favorite quotes that I have is when one of the villains is talking to Clark Kent when they're attacking Earth, and they basically have the same powers as him, and they say, for every citizen you save, we'll kill 1 million more. And you really feel the grave danger in that situation because he's not used to his powers. He's still figuring this all out, but there's the real threat of, okay, like, I'm fine, but can I save everyone around me?
Right. Yeah, and there's that weight of like, well, it's a heavy weight to have, and wondering if you can actually save everybody. And so it is more about, in DC, I think the heroes, it's less about the heroes as a person, but more, well, in a way, less about the heroes' abilities and more about what they do with them.
Yeah.
So do we think maybe we have a consensus though on our or maybe have you decided which one you think the heroes are better for?
I mean, I really like Superman, but I think overall Marvel just has a stronger, cast of characters.
Yeah.
They're more interesting to me.
I do agree. And I think we touched on it too, is that they have that, the relatability factor of, they're that regular person, like you said, with Tony Stark doing something. He was making his Iron Man suit and said, well, maybe that's something I would be able to do if I needed to and had the resources around me. That makes it kind of more tangible to us. So yeah, I think for the heroes category, we're going to have to go with Marvel. Yeah.
I'll give it to you.
All right, we've got Marvel 1 and DC nothing so far, but we'll see. We'll see. Because up next is the villains. And you already mentioned that people tend to like Marvel's heroes more, but they like DC's villains better than Marvel's. So let's get into that then.
Yeah, so I think if you look at classic examples, people will write off heroes like Superman or Batman because, and I've written off Batman as well before, and that, man, this guy knows every martial art, every language, everything in the world that he may need. So he's basically like unstoppable in different ways. So what's really interesting to me about the villains is that they're more about how they manipulate people or their mental strength than their actual physical strength. I mean, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You were saying for DC, it's more about their mental.
Yeah. For the DC's villains. Yep. Yeah. I've seen that more because, like, if you think of someone like the Joker, for example, that's the first thing I think of when I think of an iconic villain.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And he doesn't have any real like fighting skills or any superpowers. He's just crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what's the perfect antithesis to Batman. Someone who has everything. He has money, he has strength, he has knowledge, but he isn't crazy. And that's the difference.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that totally makes sense. Yeah. And I think another thing I find interesting with the villains from either of them as well, when I try to think of specific Marvel villains, I can't come up with many of them. I know most of the ones from the Spider-Man movies, but other than that, it's just kind of like, oh, well, Loki plays both sides, so he's like a villain, but he's not. You know, he's the god of mischief, so I guess he plays whatever side suits him at the time. But but there's others that do that as well in Marvel. But for some reason, it just seems to me that DC has a wider diversity for villains.
Yeah, they seem like you can pick more out of a hat randomly if you stop someone on the street and said, hey, you know, what's a good supervillain? They'd be like, oh, Lex Luthor, or oh, the Joker, or Green Goblin, or Doc Ock, or something like that. But it's like, who's going to pull out, oh, the Mandarin, you know, from Iron Man? Only the diehard comic readers are really going to get that.
Yeah, I feel like the DC villains are a little bit more widespread. I really enjoy their cheesy names, even though they are kind of cheesy. It adds to their personas about, like, I don't know if they named themselves or if they were kind of named by the press or whatever, but I think it adds to their ego a little bit, you know? Yeah.
The Spider-Man villains are perfect for that.
That's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess not much else to say on that one. Shall we? Shall we just say for villains? What do you say?
Well, I got to go with DC.
Yeah, I do too. Yep, we've got to stick with the status quo, I guess, on that.
Yeah, no.
In this I guess in this scenario, the masses are correct about the villains and the superheroes. So far, that's what we've got. All right, so how about the storyline or the theme from Marvel versus the storyline and theme from DC? There's this can be, you know, there's different storylines taken from different, you know, there's multiverse of both sides of things here. So, you know, there's tons of different storylines to draw from, and they all kind of apply to a general theme. Like, why do the heroes do what they do? And where do the villains come up with their schemes and all that kind of stuff? And so overall, kind of as a generality, Marvel or DC, where can we stand here?
Yeah, again, that's kind of a tough one, and I'll admit I've definitely read more of DC's storylines, and I've seen a lot more dark ones, like where Batman's back gets broken, or the death and return of Superman's storyline. Like those are pretty like dark scenarios, and they're really interesting. But I mean, we're kind of touching the tip of the iceberg here in terms of just the properties, because if you think of DC and Marvel, they're more than just the usual standard like heroes and villains and storylines that people think of.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, they've got more to them than just those, you know, than the ones we are more commonly familiar with because of probably the movies or TV shows.
Right. Now, I gotta ask, are you familiar with the DC comic Watchmen at all?
I am not, actually.
Okay.
I did recently acquire several comic books that I have very little knowledge on. It was just a smattering of random comics. Most of them are Sonic. You know, Sonic and Tails and that sort of thing. But there were a couple Marvel ones, there were a couple DC ones, and there were a bunch of like Mickey Mouse ones. I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not familiar with Watchmen.
That one, it was made into a movie, I think in 2009 or a few years back.
Now I think about it. Yeah, that does sound familiar as a movie, but now that you mentioned that, but I don't think I've seen the movie though. Yeah,
and it's definitely hard R material, and it kind of fits with that trend of DC storylines seeming to be darker.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. I can see that. Yep.
But it's fantastic. I mean, in my opinion, it's one of the greatest works of fiction, period, whether you're a comic fan or not. And I will throw that out there, and if anyone wants to challenge me on that, that's fine, but I would have to strongly disagree. So I guess getting back to the idea of like what has the better story or theme, it's tough to say, but I have been drawn more to the DC line of stories just by like reading synopses, or this is a preview of what it is. So
yeah, I think to me, most Marvel storylines tend to repeat the same thing over and over again. Like, it starts off with either, I'm thinking movies specifically, it starts off with maybe like a glimpse of the bad guy, but then there's like, a big storyline involving the hero. And then there's like the villain comes in and tries to ruin everything. And then the hero comes back and does something and this saves the day. But I feel like DC takes more risks and allows more bad things to happen to the heroes. And they, like you said, I think DC's stories seem darker than Marvel's. Although I could just be comparing to mainly like the Avengers storylines, because that's what I'm most familiar with from Marvel.
Sure.
But I mean, I guess kind of X-Men is a little darker too, but most of the DC content, and the more that I get into the DC content, the more I get interested in the storylines behind the heroes and that sort of thing. I've been lately getting into the TV shows like Green Arrow and The Flash, the CW shows. And so getting into those has kind of shown me that DC has an interesting story. They're good at diversifying, I think, and then which allows them to take more risks, and they can have more relatable storylines to more wider variety of people.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about the TV shows either, and I've only seen, if I can recall correctly, one episode of The Flash, that show, the first episode. And one of my friends, close friend of mine, he's a really big fan of The Flash, and he had kind of pressed me like, you got to check it out. And I was familiar with some of the further out interesting storylines involving Flash and like what his speed allows him to do and the consequences with that. And the first episode really, taps into that idea of, like I didn't know that much about the storyline, but I could see very clearly where it was going and what storylines they would tap into that could get pretty dark. And really, like, there's a lot of levels and depth to them.
Right. Yep.
So, yeah.
Well, and that's another thing, too, is it's kind of The Flash, the TV show, is a little bit intertwined with Green Arrow, the TV show, as well. So, if you want to keep watching some more, you could do both of them. And I think there's one episode of Green Arrow that The Flash is in before the Flash show actually starts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he comes in, he's on Green Arrow first, and then like the next episode after that is like the first episode of The Flash or something like that. I forget exactly how it plays out, but it's something similar to that. So I really enjoyed what I've seen of both of those so far. It's just like, learning more about Green Arrow and his backstory and all of that. I'm a huge backstory person, by the way. So like the more backstory I get, the better. And the way they laid out Green Arrow as a show, they go into his backstory about like how he learned certain skills and why he's doing certain things, and how he knows certain villains and that sort of thing too. So I love that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I think we've both agreed overall DC's got to take the cake on the storyline theme category here.
Yeah, I'm definitely biased, but I mean.
I don't know that I'm biased, so I think us agreeing means you might not be that biased.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
we'll go with that. All right, so far we've got Marvel at 1 and DC at 2. Let's see how things line up when we hit adaptations of the comics. So we've taken the comics and they've adapted them into films that we've talked about already, TV shows, cartoons, and now you're also mentioning video games too, which I know there have been other video games as well, but apparently there's some newer ones coming out that I'm not familiar with yet. So
yeah. So I like to game when I have spare time, which isn't very often, but when I do, there's been a lot of rumbling lately on video game properties, because a lot of licensed material in games, just as a quick sidebar, is not very good and hasn't been for years. But all of a sudden, you get studios who are developing games like the Batman Arkham series, which really allow you to feel like you are Batman. in Gotham.
Cool. Actually, yeah, I've seen some like gameplay videos of that, and it looks really cool.
Yeah, and it's a full series. Like, I think they have at least 4 games, and I'm not sure if they're finished with it or not, or if they're doing more. But and then on the flip side of things, there's a new Spider-Man game that was announced coming out for the PlayStation 4 this past summer, and that looks so fun. Like, if you're a Spider-Man fan, you should look up footage of that because it looks phenomenal.
I bet it does, because PS4 can do 4K, so that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Although I don't have a PS4. My husband is trying to debate whether he wants to get one or not. We have an Xbox One, and we're like, oh, this is so good. I know. I'm like, I don't know if we really should. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But anyways, I hear there's some really cool PS4 exclusive games. And Spider-Man would be super fun to play as, because, you could do your web swinging and all kinds of stuff, and that would be awesome. Yeah.
If anyone's interested in looking up that footage, just go into YouTube and type in Spider-Man PS4, and it will be one of the first things that pop up. It's really cool stuff.
YouTube is your friend.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So we talked about video games, and we've mentioned the TV shows and the films and things, but maybe we can get a little bit more in depth on this, going into like which movies do we think are better, or which TV shows do we think are better, and that sort of thing. So what are your thoughts on those ones?
Yeah, so TV shows, I'll admit I haven't paid that close attention to either side of them. I haven't been hooked enough yet by the properties, but the films, I've seen a lot of both Marvel and DC, and to me the cream of the crop is definitely the Sam Raimi trilogy of Spider-Man films. And
you mean the first ones?
Yeah, the ones that came out early 2000. I don't know how you feel about those, if you like those as well.
I enjoyed them, but the third one I was was weirded out by just the way the way he went with the character on that. I'm like, why did he go so emo?
Yeah, and the dancing. Everyone thinks of the dancing.
It was odd. But anyways, I did really enjoy those. Those were the first Marvel movies that I think I probably saw, and really enjoyed them. And so I don't think I've seen any of the other Spider-Man movies yet. I've only seen the newest Spider-Man because I saw him in Civil War, Avengers Civil War. So that's the only way I've seen any of the newer Spider-Mans. I didn't see the middle one, but I saw the newest one. So yeah, those ones definitely are great.
Yeah, and touching on that point again about Civil War and the team up films. I mean, the film industry, the movie industry, is really indebted to Marvel right now in terms of cinematic universes, because they really got it right, especially with the first Avengers film. And there's
definitely,
there's some debate about some of the later films, how well they hold up in comparison, but that first Avengers film for sure was a game changer. Like, it changed everything.
Absolutely. I think that one is probably one of my favorite movies to this day. Like, the Avengers first one, totally is fantastic. Lots of really quotable lines from it too, which is awesome. But it also, carries through the storyline of the Avengers, and it like holds to that whole universe. So that's really awesome as well.
Yeah.
I also so I think adaptations wise, personally, I want to say DC does a really good job with running their TV shows, although I haven't seen a whole lot of the Marvel TV shows. I know there's like Jessica Jones. But there's not a ton of them out. So I feel like DC does a better job in that arena, but.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think DC's been around longer in the TV show game for sure. I know that Marvel has started to tap into Netflix for some of this stuff. And I actually did watch Jessica Jones. My fiance and I actually binged that because we're pretty big fans of that actress, Kristen Ritter.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And she's really good in it. But I mean, that's really the only show that we've like tapped into.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it's different. I mean, it's hard for me to keep up with a lot of the all the shows and all the movies that are coming out. Oh,
I know, that's the thing, is unless you have like unlimited time and you can sit down and
Right.
watch everything forever, there's really it's tough to keep up with every single thing. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But okay, I think though overall for our adaptations, what do you have to say for that overall?
Well, I think I kind of talked myself into Marvel's corner for this. It kind of feels like, I mean, just
I think
overall.
so too.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think the movie industry has kind of overarched everything else. It's easier to catch up on movies than it is to catch up on a TV show, first of all. And then there's also the gaming aspect too, which that's important for people to take a look at too. So there's, a few games out from Marvel that are pretty cool, and the new Spider-Man game I think is going to be super awesome. So I'm going to do some more looking on that actually. But yeah, so I think we're going to have to go with Marvel for that. So we're tied up now at 2-2, which means our team ups here has to be our tiebreaker. So we mentioned a little bit that, the Avengers movie kind of really made solidified Marvel's team up game, but we can also talk a little bit about sidekicks and that sort of thing too, because that's heroes teaming up with other heroes, I guess you could say. So yeah, it's interesting because now that I think about it, when I think of the word sidekicks, the first thing I'm thinking of is like Batman and Robin, but exactly.
I'm not recalling many Marvel sidekicks when I think about it. Like,
you're totally right, though. That's the weird thing. It's like I was trying to think of sidekicks for Marvel. They don't really have sidekicks. They've got like supporting characters, maybe like Tony Stark has Pepper, and that sort of thing. But other than that, like, they're not actually like out there fighting crime with the hero. I just think of Batman and Robin, and there's Wonder Woman and Wonder Girl, I guess, or something like that. So I think there's Wonder Girl. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It was part of a TV show, cartoon series for a little while.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there's just, Batman and Robin's so iconic, almost just as iconic as the Joker is. So, if you think of any like well-known duo, that's probably the one you're going to think of, unless you think of like Tom and Jerry or
yeah, they're definitely superheroes, right?
Like yeah, totally. But I mean, just in general in pop culture, like if you think of a pair of people doing similar things together, that's not a couple, Batman and Robin.
Yeah, and there's some, not to double dip into this category, but there's some really powerful storylines that come out of that duo, because they tap into the idea of, well, Batman kind of had a tough upbringing because his parents died. Well, then how does he find someone who is like-minded and is willing to go on the crusade that he is? And there's like 4 different versions of Robin too, and that's not even getting into like the original Robin becomes basically a Batman in his own right by becoming Nightwing at one point when he's older. Which that guy's so cool. He's one of my favorite superheroes.
Nice.
But yeah, there's a lot to be mined out of there just from that duo and like the Bat family. I mean, goodness, Batman has probably like 5 or 6 different sidekicks, quote unquote. Like there's a Batgirl, and there's, I mean, Alfred gets involved in some storylines, not necessarily in like direct fighting or anything, but
well, he helps a lot, though.
Yes, and I think
Alfred's really good for like centering Batman and helping him realize his place in things. Because sometimes Batman can get a little overzealous.
Yeah, he's always kind of saying, "No, come back to center, find your center."
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
The caring old man. Yeah,
yeah. But I mean, I still have to say the Avengers have a special place for me just because of the first movie, the first Avengers movie. It was so well done. Yeah,
and I think that speaks a lot to what Joss Whedon and the creators at the time did for basically playing the long game with those individual films and then bringing them together in such a way that actually worked, which was really surprising. So
they did each individual heroes, and then they did the Avengers movie, and so that just kind of culminated things together in a really, really awesome way.
Yeah, and it made you care about each of the individual members and not feel like, oh, who's this guy? We don't care about him at all, or we haven't followed him at all. You know, you had a lot of different motivations being pulled basically in 4 or 5 different directions by that point.
Right. Although I have to say, I'm really excited for Justice League, for the movie coming out. Well, it comes out today, technically, but I won't be seeing it for a bit. Our next episode is going to be on that, though. So I'm really excited for that one, though, because I saw Wonder Woman, which I loved. And
I wish I saw that. I did not get the chance to see it. Yeah,
if you ever do, I highly recommend, especially if you love the DC storylines, because it's interesting, and it has a cool crossover character from Harry Potter, which is awesome.
Oh, interesting.
You wouldn't expect, so I love it. I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan at all, but
yes.
Yeah, Professor Lupin plays a character in that, which I was totally not expecting. I'm like, no way.
Huh.
So yeah, I was really surprised by that. But yeah, I really enjoyed Wonder Woman. I did not see Batman vs. Superman or any of the other recent DC movies, but I really, really want to. And I'm super excited for Aquaman coming out next year as well. Because I don't know much about Aquaman to begin with, and I kind of want to know more. So.
Yeah, and his portrayal from the promotional material we've seen for Justice League actually makes him look kind of cool instead of this
cheesy, like, almost looks like, what is the guy from SpongeBob?
Oh yeah,
that guy.
What's his name? I know what. Yes, yeah, like I know what you're talking about. That he's just like this. The pseudo
like funny that a weird guy that doesn't really have any important powers, but they kind of like revamped Aquaman, and I think it's gonna be awesome. So
yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that, I mean, I was aware of the Avengers before the film came out, and I was moderately interested in them, but I gotta be honest, I think for me, I was more interested in individual characters from the Avengers instead of like, oh, these 4 are just kind of thrown into a barrel for whatever reason and they fight crime. But to me, what drew me more to Justice League, like that concept and the comic sense, is the idea that you have someone like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Trinity, as it's often referred to, and you have all these like really powerful characters together. And the first thought that comes to mind is, well, why do they need each other? They're so strong, but the threats are that much stronger when they come together. It's really, I like to think of them as the Olympian gold medalists of superhero geekdom, because they're just everything all together at once. And there's, you want to talk about overpowered. I mean, they're kind of overpowered.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
But that is a really cool way to think of it. It's like the top Olympians all joined together. It's almost like the gods of Mount Olympus that have joined forces. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it.
That's kind of it. But yeah, all right. So as far as team ups go, where do we think these line up? What do you say?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm a little biased, but given what we said about Batman and Robin, like actually having a sidekick ordeal going on, and we didn't even touch on some of the other characters like Superman. He has some stuff like other Kryptonians who he's teamed up with before. And then just the sheer weight of the Justice League, to me, I gotta go with DC. That's just me.
Okay. I'm actually gonna disagree with you on this one. Only because we didn't even mention the X-Men, but I love the X-Men and the storyline behind them.
Fair. Very fair.
And so there's the Avengers, but then there's also the X-Men and all of that. And I have to go with Marvel. So I know everybody's been holding their breath trying to see how we land here, but
right.
I'm Team Marvel, and it sounds like you're Team DC overall for both of us. You know,
Yeah.
you've got 3 DC categories and 2 Marvel, and I have 3 Marvel and 2 DC. So I think that's all then. So
Yeah.
we agree to disagree, I guess. But we stuck with our initial gut reactions though. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, interesting. But we didn't acknowledge a lot of the other, benefits to both sides. And, why not both? Why can't you enjoy both?
True. I mean, I'm not saying I don't enjoy both because I gave each group a fair shot too, and I think it was tough. It was especially tough to decide, I think, with the team ups for sure.
Yeah.
And the adaptations, I think, because for the adaptations, it's not really a level playing field necessarily because I just don't think there's as many quality DC movies out there yet.
Not yet. I mean, they're working on it. So we'll see what happens 5 years from now.
Yeah, no, exactly. And who knows, maybe there's some DC movies I just don't know about enough yet, and maybe if I see them, they'll change my mind. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's our take. I'm Marvel and Jack is DC. So I guess we didn't really decide much of anything. If anything, you just know more about Marvel and DC now.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. Well, thanks for getting nerdy with us. Share your thoughts about Marvel versus DC on our Facebook page, Beauties and Headcanons, and also let us know any topic suggestions that you have. Tune in next week for our episode on the Justice League movie, like I mentioned. Super excited to be seeing that. And also subscribe to us on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and iTunes. We'd love for you guys to give us a review and a rating so we can see how you're doing and make our show improve. And then finally, just a huge thank you to Public House Media for making this show possible. Go ahead and check them out on Facebook, on Twitter at ThePHmedia, or on their website at thephmedia.com to stay up to date on this podcast and the network and any other new podcasts that are coming out with. There's a lot of new ones coming out lately, so that's a great way to keep tabs on that. And thanks again, Jack, for joining me this week. Hopefully we can maybe talk about some things in the future because this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Right, definitely. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.